Meher Baba. This talk is out of gratitude to beloved Baba for leaving his Mandali, who through their loving remembrances of him extended beloved Baba's physical presence for all of us. Let me start with all the Mandali were very important. All of them were unusual. But the one of them who had a major effect on my life with Baba was Mehera. I first met Mehera in 1969 at the Darshan program. Our group was a group that came in mid-April, and she had decided to meet all of the men. And the other groups that had come earlier, she had not met the men. And we were in Guru Prasad, it was a long hall with a men's side and a women's side. And on the women's side, there's doors opened into the long, big hall. And we were told to go through this door and that Mehera would be on our right. And we should look at her and just say Jai Baba, and she would say Jai Baba, and then we should move on. So when I passed through that door and I looked at Mehera and I looked into her eyes, I had this sensation that the depth within this being was so infinite. I could fall into her forever. There was an infinite space within her. And I kind of walked away dazed. But I didn't know when I would ever come back to India again, because when I heard of Baba in 1967, Baba was in seclusion. And it wasn't until he extended an invitation to give darshan in 69 that we were able to go. So he had dropped his body. I thought, there'll be no more invitations. How will I ever see Mehera again? And when I was working in the West and doing whatever I was doing, I would remember her and think how much I wanted to see her again. In 73, when I found out people were going on pilgrimage to India, I went, and one of the first things I did was go to see Mehera. And Dr. Goher, who was Baba's doctor, had me bring a tray of drinks out onto the veranda of the house where Baba lived to serve Mehera. And when I served her, she smiled at me and she said, she complimented me on my mustache, which was a big handlebar mustache. And that relationship over the years developed more and more until finally, in about 5 or 6 years later, she would ask me to stay back on Sundays after all the pilgrims left, and she would have me to keep me on the veranda with her and tell me, she would have planned something. She'd have like a recipe she wanted me to know. She'd had something cooked by someone for me to taste, or she would be telling me the inside story of the gossip of the ashram. So anyway, she was delightful. And I remember how there were many a Sunday where I would be getting ready to go out, and I would just feel so filthy. My mind was just awash in my own personal filth. And I thought, how can I possibly come before Mehera? But she was expecting me, so I had to go. And I would go, and the minute I saw her, everything was gone but her. She was the only thing there. So that relationship, she also became concerned that we living at Meherabad were not having enough protein in our diet. So she had started having meat cooked for us once a month at Meherabad, and Eruch and I particularly. Eruch was one of my best friends, who lived at Meherabad with his wife Heather, and the two of us would be called out to have lunch in the back of the kitchen. So there we were eating lobster curry one day. Because there were Narnavas, who was one of the close Mandali disciples, she had an order from Baba to bring from Bombay lobster curry that her housekeeper would make, who was Goan, because Mehera liked it. Whenever she came from Bombay, she had orders to bring lobster curry. So she had shared it with Eruch and I. It was quite delicious. She told one of the women residents that, she said, most men are uncomfortable with me, so I am uncomfortable with them. For those of you who don't know, men didn't touch Mehera, and Mehera didn't touch men. During her life, with Baba, not even a man's shadow was allowed to pass over her clothing on a clothesline while it was drying. Baba kept her so carefully secluded. But anyway, she said, most men are uncomfortable with me, so I'm uncomfortable with them. But Alan is comfortable with me, so I am comfortable with him. That was that was a great thing to know. She was very supportive of anything I did at Meherabad or Meherazad, and particularly in the arts. John Majek knows that, how supportive Mehera was of anything we did in the arts. Let me move on. I may come back to Mehera. Oh, yes. She had told me, we did plays at Mehera's birthday, we did a play, and at Baba's birthday, we did a play. And after one of the plays, Heather and I both, and John, we all worked, when John was there for a few years, we all worked on these plays together. And, Heather and I both came from kind of a contemporary theater background, a little avant-garde. And one of the things that we would do is bring the actor on the stage and the audience together. It was kind of a concept that was popular back then, by having the play extend out into the audience. And Mehera called me over after one of these plays and said, I don't like that. Don't do that. She wanted the proscenium. She would stay behind the proscenium. And she wanted it, it was her taste. She wanted it like that. So we were consistent with that for a few years. And there was a play we did. We had written this play that had the story of Janak Raja in it, who was this perfect master king, who a young mendicant came to and said, how can you be a perfect master if you're a king and you have all this, the trappings of a king, all the wealth, all the responsibility? And so Janak Raja said, I'll show you. So he had the young mendicant hold a bowl of milk and walk around the perimeter of the city. Behind him was walking the executioner with a big sword. And if he spilled a drop of milk, his head was to be cut off. So he walked. So I thought, how can I show this, covering this distance and all? I thought, I was like at a loss to figure it out. So I thought, well, it's so well motivated. I don't think Mehera will mind if I just have him walk down the center aisle of the audience and come around to demonstrate that. But he walked around. And so I did that. Well, about 2 or 3 days later, when I was at Meherabad and sitting with Mehera, no, not sitting with her, all the other pilgrims were leaving, and it was a Sunday. I was going to sit on the veranda with her. And so I was waiting for everyone to leave. And when everyone was gone, she turned around immediately and said, why did you do that? I told you not to do that. And I said, because I'm a fool. And that came from Baba. He saved me in that situation because I had the understanding to say, I am a fool. And she said, never do it again. I said, okay. And then it was gone completely. So she was wonderful. Let me talk about Nadja, Baba's cook. She was uneducated, but incredibly sharp. She, as a cook, and I'm a cook, she had the understanding that what she liked wasn't necessarily good, that there were other things that you could cook that were good, but she might not like. So she was always experimenting, particularly when the Western, like Harry Kenmore, one of Baba's close disciples from New York, when they would come here, she would be experimenting, trying to cook in different things for them, Western things for them, not all Indian stuff. She was quite amazing that way. Jacko told a story to me the other day that I had never heard about how when Harry was there, he had a particular way he wanted his coffee made. He had a particular drip machine, and it had to be like this and had to be like that. And it was given to Rano, who was Baba's artist, but she'd been given the duty to make Harry's coffee. And every day there would be complaints about the coffee. And finally, one day she was in the kitchen trying to make the coffee and fighting with everything. And Nadja came in and she said, Nadja, you make it. I can't do it. So Nadja just kind of threw things together and filled the cup, and the cup went in to Harry. And Harry said, at last, someone's made me good coffee. And then Rana went back and said, what did you do? And she said, oh, I just threw the coffee in and boiled it, and then threw some, strained it out, and that was it. But Nadja had she had an unusual relationship with Baba. She was Baba's cousin. She and her brother Pendu, who was also among the close disciples, were Baba's cousins. And in the ashram, I don't know if any of you read the stories of where one time at Meherabad in the early years, Baba got fed up with everyone, and they were all arguing with each other and all complaining about this. And he said, I'm leaving. And he marched out of Meherabad and went down the road. And he was so fiery that everyone was afraid to go after him, except Nadja. And Nadja followed Baba down the road, and it was her who persuaded him to come back again. She had this wonderful story. The day the Pilgrim Center opened at Lower Meherabad, we had invited all of the Mandali and some of the local Baba lovers for lunch to open the MPC. This was in 1980. And when Mehera came, when all the women came, everyone was busy. I was running around doing this and that, trying to keep stuff together in the kitchen. These cooks one of them was drunk, I think. I managed to hire. Anyway, I come back to the kitchen, and standing outside the kitchen at the screen door was Nadja. And I said, Nadja, what are you doing? She said, I'm waiting for you. She said, I can't go into the kitchen without your permission. I said, but Nadja, it's your kitchen. She said, no, I have to take your permission first. Look at her consideration. The integrity of the being was quite remarkable. Anyway, her recipes, her interest in the food, that influenced all of the meals in both the MPC and have been carried on down into the MPR. Let me come to Mani. Mani, Baba's sister, was a phenomenal artist, a performer. She was just inspired in anything she did, really. And she was incredibly supportive of anything in the arts. Baba, in the trust deed, there are 10 objects. The first object is stated as spiritual training to lead the life like the new life. And then follows the remaining 9 articles. Well, in the original deed, the spiritual training was to be accomplished by doing these other 9 articles. 8 of those articles are involved with the arts or the creative arts in some form or the other. Baba really liked the arts. So that was singing, film, plays, giving talks, all of it's in there. And by doing those things with the intent of trying to live the new life while you're doing them, being in the world but not of it. That is my understanding of what the spiritual training Baba talked about at Meherabad is. So anyway, the arts involve money. I don't know if any of you received any letters from Mani. These beautiful little drawing. She would always put a little caricature on the bottom of the letter. And but she was the one Baba would turn to say, I want to skit in the afternoon. I need to be distracted from my work, or the weight of my work. I need some entertainment. So by the afternoon, Mani would have put together some little skit with the women, and away they'd go. She, it was great to have her as a friend. She was so supportive. Something about all of the Mandali I want to comment on is the way they approached a Baba lover who came there. Really speaking, that you, and I'm sure any of you who have met the Mandali remember this. They approach you as they see you as someone who Baba has called to be there, and they want to. And their first thing they do is say, "How did you come to Baba?" And they want to find out. But that tremendous respect they feel for the pilgrim or anyone who comes there is because they acknowledge that no one can come there without Baba calling them. And so they really respected everyone. I mean, it set you free. It was wonderful. I remember when I started the Savage's Kitchen, which was a resident kind of communal kitchen at Lower Meherabad. And I went to Bonnie and said, initially we were cooking for ourselves when we all first moved there. We all moved there within 6 months of each other. And each of us had, Padri had instructed us to get these kind of wick stoves that burned kerosene, and we all cooked in our rooms for ourselves. And I realized, well, I could, for the 5 of us, I could certainly cook every day and I've got a couple of helpers, several of women servants that could help me out. So I thought I could do that. And I went to Heather and Eric and Janet and said, I would be willing to do this if you were interested. I said, all I would ask is that, you, Eric and Heather, one day in a week, cook one meal. And I said, Janet, and said, you one in the week, cook one meal. So I have 2 meals where I don't have to be responsible. And they agreed. And the Savage Kitchen began. When I told Bonnie, she said, it's just going to be more work for you. Why are you doing it? She said, but if you feel it's right to do, I'll support you. So the Savage's Kitchen started, and early on in the kitchen, it became clear to me that my skills as a cook were different than what was required at that time in Meherabad. And I was trying to figure out what to do and how to make everybody happy and how to please them with the food. And there were the arguments and complaints and dissatisfaction. And one day, one of the residents came in and was abusing me, and as if I was doing this intentionally to make them uncomfortable. And it really hurt me. And I was weeping, making my own eggs, and in the corner, I was weeping and saying, Baba, what to do? I don't know what to do. I'm doing everything I can think of. And I felt Baba within me say, go to Eruch. That's what he's there for. And I'm not one of those people who would go and ask questions or, want advice. I figure Baba's going to take care of whatever I need to have done. But in this case, Baba was telling me, go to Eruch. That's why he's there. So I wrote a note and sent it on a bicycle to town because there were no phones at that time. And the courier carried it into Ahmednagar, gave it to another guy who on a bicycle took it out to Meherabad. When he got to Meherabad, Eruch read the note, immediately responded, gave it back, and had the guy go all the way to Meherabad from Meherabad to deliver the note, to come to see him the next day in the afternoon. So I'm moving on to Eruch now. We're in the Eruch world. So I went out to Meherabad, and Eruch called me to his room, and he sat on one end of his bed, and I sat on the other end of his bed. And I told him what was happening in the kitchen and all the dissatisfaction and all the difficulty. And he said, first he said, let me go back a little bit. When I was on my way to go to Meherabad to see Eruch, I had to ask Padri to use the motorcycle because he had a motorcycle which he would let me use. But I had to tell him where I was going, when I would be back, I had to take his permission. So when I came around and met Padri to ask his permission, I thought, I'm going to ask Padri what to do in the kitchen, just sort of see what he'll say. I'll do whatever Eruch says, but I'm just curious. So I put the story out to Padri, and he says, well, it's really very simple. There are three things you need to do. And he tells, this is number one, this is number two, and this is number three. And number three, that didn't really make sense to me. I couldn't figure it out, but he said, there are these three things. I thought, okay, but I'm going to do whatever Eruch says. I didn't tell Padri that. So then I go to Meherabad. I get to Meherabad, and I again lay out the story of the travail of the resident kitchen, which Padri had named Savage's Kitchen, because we were savages. Um, he and Eruch says, first he said, let me dictate a statement to you about what the kitchen is all about. And he said, I'll dictate it, you write it down, and you read it out when you go back to Meherabad to the participants in the kitchen. But you have to say it's yours. You can't tell them that I've dictated it. You have to say that you wrote it. He said, and secondly, he said, there are three things you need to do. He said, number one, number two, and number three. And I thought, they were the same three things in the same order. So and again, I thought the third one, what is this deal? I don't get this. But anyway, on the way back to Meherabad, I'm passing through Ahmednagar. I stopped at the trust office, and Bauji was sitting in his office, and I thought, ask Bauji. So I go into Bauji's office, I lay out the travail of the savage's kitchen, and Bauji says, oh, that's really simple. There are three things you need. And they were the same three things. These were the three things. Everyone pays the same amount of money no matter how many meals they take or how much food they eat. The food should be simple, not complex, nothing fancy. Simple food. And the third one was everyone buys their own fruit, which I couldn't figure out. Obviously, there had been some issue over fruit in the ashram at some point. So those were the three things. But the fact there couldn't be more. These three people were so different in nature, and to have them all say the same thing exactly was pretty remarkable. So we did that, and for about 2 or 3 years, things went on pretty well. And then, of course, someone wants this, someone wants that. Well, I don't like this. I don't like. It started again, but that's just food service. So let's see. Eruch. Let me talk a little bit about Padri. Padri was our Dumbledore. He was the wizard that Baba gave us to not let us, to prevent us from hurting ourselves and getting into trouble. Many people thought of him as, he's kind of has a reputation of being very severe and kind of austere and sort of strict, and he wasn't. He was tremendously considerate. He really, but he really upheld the thought. He felt that everyone's relationship with Baba was personal, and it was between them, Baba, and the lover. The relationship, no one could get in between there. So he would never kind of interfere with your life. He would support you, and if you thought you were going off the rails, he'd get you back on. But he was not hard or angry or difficult at all. In fact, he had the most refined aesthetic of all of the Mandali, I would say. His sense, it was almost like a Japanese minimalist sense of beauty. I remember an incident where he was fierce. He and Pendu were like the kings of that world, and Arangoan was part of it. So Arangoan would bring all their problems to them, and there was a worker on the MPC building when it was being built who his wife stole something. And he lied about it. Now, with Padri, most things would fly if you were honest, but you never wanted to lie to Padri. So this guy lied to him, and Padri walked over to him and he lied and said this again. Is this really what you want to say? The guy said, yes, it didn't happen like that. It was like this, it was like that. And Padri started slapping him. And Padri was tall guy and he had these big hands and he was like, whack, whack. And it was like, watching this, Eric and I were both watching it. It was so frightening. And the guy couldn't move. He was frozen. And, I would have tried to run away, but he was frozen. Padre slapping him this way, slapping him that way. And it went on and on and on. And I kept thinking, when is he going to stop? And on. And suddenly he stops. And the guy kind of collapses a little bit and moves away. And then Padre turns around and reaches down and picks this little wildflower and turns to Eruch and says, this is called Portulaca. And it represents the spiritual hierarchy. The center is the avatar, and each of the 5 petals are the perfect masters, and each of the 5 petals have 3 notches in them, which represent the planes. No anger at all. There was no anger there. He was just dealing out what was necessary at that moment. One other time I saw him beat a child who had stolen a dipstick out of a big diesel engine. And he heard that this kid was kind of like a criminal kid anyway. His tail was bent the wrong way. And his mother was Mansari's servant, and she was a character also. So Padre sent word to the mother, I think your son has taken this dipstick from my Lister engine, bring it back. So a few hours later, here she comes with the kid in tow, screaming and crying, and she's got the dipstick, and she gives it to Padre. She said, beat him. And Padre had a little caning switch, like, an old school teacher. And he started hitting the kid on the legs, and it must have hurt like hell. And the kid's screaming and rolling around on the ground. And again, it's like, when is he going to stop? And he stops, and the mother says, now you bow down to him, to Padre. And Padre said, no, don't come near me. You go in the hall and bow down to the chair of the master of this house. I'm a slave. You bow down to him, not to me. So are those shocking stories? Anyway, I remember he took interest in the plays. When we would rehearse Mehera's birthday play on the amphitheater stage, which was just down the hill a little bit from the Samadhi. And he would when the dress rehearsal would come around, I would always see him somewhere out, ranging around, watching the dress rehearsal. And very often, in fact, every time that he would come up and watch it, when I came down the hill, he would have notes that he would give me about the rehearsal, and they were always great. So that went on. I mean, there were so many things with Padre. One of these big diesel engines, he wanted Eric and I to see how to take it apart. So he took it. They ran the pumps in the wells at that time with those. So he took it apart and he showed us the little governor, the thing that kept the speed steady. It was a little tiny wire going through a hole, and he had made a tool to clean out the hole and all of this. He was showing all these little things in his. It was like it was like Dumbledore, the wizard within his lair, in the engine room at Meherabad. The first time I killed a cobra was about a 9 to 10 foot cobra. And it wasn't hard to kill, I have to say. I think it was molting, so it wasn't very mobile. But anyway, I killed the cobra, and word got back to Padre, and I was in the kitchen, and he sent word for me to go bring the snake. He wanted to see it. So I went out in the field where I'd killed the cobra, and I got it in a gamela, which is kind of an iron pan, round bottom pan, and I brought it back to Padre. And then he said, now let me show you. He brings out a dissecting kit and starts dissecting the cobra's head. I want you to see the fangs and the venom sacs. So he's taking carefully dissecting the head of the cobra. I'm terrified he's going to prick himself and get poisoned, but he showed me all the stuff about the snake, and that was just another little example of how interested he was in everything. One day he taught me to cook something called ala marumba, which is a kind of gooseberry jam. He was a good cook. He was quite the Renaissance man kind of person. And about the Duni, he was in charge of the Duni at Meherabad. So yeah, there were many little rules about the Duni. One of them was he didn't want anyone to point their feet toward the Duni if they were seated. You should be cross-legged or point your feet away. It was disrespectful of the fire to point your feet at the Duni. And also about the Dunya, there was an occasion where I was going through a Glow magazine and I saw the poem that Baba had written about the Duni, translated by Adi K. Irani, Baba's secretary. And I read it over, and there was also a printing of what Baba had written. But when Baba wrote something like that, he would use many languages. There would be an English word, Urdu word, Persian word, Marathi word, whatever expressed what he wanted to express, he would pull it out of whatever language that he knew. There was not one language in things like that. It was all mixed up with many languages. So I took this and I went to Padre and I said, what do you think of this? He looked at it and he read Adi's translation. He said, Mister, you give that to me. Let me translate that. So obviously he didn't like Adi's translation. And I found out later that when Baba it was common for Baba to say to the Mandali, write a ghazal about such and so. And we'll go over it in the evening, and then they would read them all out in the evening, and it was like a competition where Dr. Ghani, one of Baba's close disciples from school days, was a disciple but had been Baba's friend in school. He would always win. He was like a Urdu scholar. But the person who always came second was Padri. So Padri translated the poem and he said, now you read this at every Duni, which I do. And then about 6 or 7 months later, he called me to his room and he said, and you also read this, a poem called The True Teacher, which is by Francis Barabazan. So I'm trying to show you how eclectic his interest was. There was an occasion where at Amartithi, Padre he came to my room, knocked at my door, and I opened it. He came in, we sat on my bed, and he was telling me how he wanted my room for a storeroom for the kitchen for the Amartithi food tent. No, storeroom for the kitchen. And the resident kitchen was very nearby that we'd started. And I said, why not put it there? And he said, no, I want your room, mister. And I tried to persuade him out of it, and it was like suddenly he said, mister, listen to me. You're out of here on this date. This is when you're out of this room. I need the room for Amartithi. That's it. So I learned he means what he says. I learned it. Let's see. Oh, another Savage's Kitchen story. Originally it was in my room, and we would all eat in my room, and I'd cook in my room. And then Padre gave it permission to use this old cow shed that had been the shed where they kept bullocks and cattle when the ashram was operating in the early years. And it was just tin sheets with some, branches kind of holding it up. They're called bullies. They're just poles. And he said, "I'll give my handyman. He'll come and we'll put up some bamboo matting, and I've got some broken flagstones you can use to make a floor in it." And so we had this lean-to kind of kitchen made. And Mehera heard about this, and she was on that. She had sent a note out to the women saying that when we come this month, I want to see the kitchen. We're going to come to Lower Meherabad, and I want to see the kitchen. So I got everything ready, And one of the reasons Padri called us savages was because when we eat, we were sitting on the ground. He explained to us also that Baba had said that it was not good to sit on the flagstone directly, that it would leach the heat out of your body and you'd get arthritis. So he said everyone should have a gunny sack at least to sit on. So Padri gave us gunny sacks. And we were sitting on gunny sacks and eating out of our plates on the floor. Well, when Mehera came and saw all that, she didn't say anything, but she went back to Meherabad. She told Rano, said, "Go back there tomorrow. I want you to take measurements, and we're going to get tables and benches made for them." And so Rano came out the next day and took all measurements of the size of the area and what would fit here and what would fit there, and went back. And the Mandali paid from the money they received. The trust didn't buy those. The Mandali themselves paid for those benches, and there were 3 tables and 4 benches, something like that. Anyway, and another thing about the Mandali with money was that in the very early years of the trust had no money at all. And the income that was coming in, and what is now called firstly, and the charitable trust, the firstly part is what supports the Mandali. So at that time, they were eating 1 meal a day in order to be able to support Meherabad to survive. So they were hardcore. I know there's Duni tonight, and if you wanted, I would read the Duni poem tonight, but I wanted to read it to you in advance because people say, what's the significance of the Duni? And in this poem, when Baba told the Mandali, write a ghazal about the Duni, and they all wrote a ghazal about the Duni, and Baba said, "Oh, you're all mad. None of you understand anything." This is Padri telling me. None of you understand anything. I'll have to write it myself. So Baba wrote a poem about the Duni, which clearly tells you what the Duni is. I'd like to read it now to you, so that tonight, even if I read it again, you'll have a better sense of what the Duni is. "O Duni of Meherabad, how can I express in words your qualities? My pen is utterly incapable. Your flaming mercy descends on all, that wondrous gift to mankind. To quench your glowing flames, Yazdan himself sent cooling rain. Thus he bestowed on you the honor. To keep on giving relief to the thousands, to keep on blessing the helpless. May you keep on bestowing your grace on the ones who yearn to receive it. A wali is a man of God. Your qualities are like a wali, dual. Those who merge in you become like you. Marvelous is your glory, wonderful your nature. Capable you are of making life blossom. Capable you are indeed of uprooting the tree of life. You have both the power of making things flourish and also die. Both are your blessing. You'll cook 100 victuals for that one who tends you, but you'll make that one suffer who annoys you. A wali has queer conflicts. A wali has a queer blemish. A wali has these dual qualities of either preserving or destroying. O Duni of Meherabad, Nagar would have been arid without water. Observing the situation, you acted and relieved farmers' worries. You hardened in the form of fire. You melted in the form of water. You gave warmth to the near ones, and you made the world happy. Remain always surrendered to Baba. Pay homage always to your Guru. Brave are those who serve at the feet of the Sadguru. Limitless is your glory, O Duni. Only rishis and munis can understand your qualities. You put Bairam the fire to sleep, and you made the clouds weep. The clouds melted because of your flames and wetted my shirt and coat. You are the real slave of the Sadguru. Remain always near him. Difficult it became for the famine to exist. It got frightened. You really are the true slave of your master. You are my fiery staff, performing your duties through my order of mercy. Jai Baba. So what Baba says is that Duni has the consciousness of a fifth plane saint. It's a wali. No, does that mean, he doesn't explain further, but that's remarkable to think about. But everyone should figure out, in my opinion, figure out what they think that means to them. So, Eruch, back to Eruch. At that time when I was seeing Mehera every Sunday evening for an hour usually, when I would leave her, Eruch would call me into his room and I'd spend an hour with Eruch. And during that time, and he would kind of grill me on what the news was of Meherabad, what's going on, who's doing what, how's this going, how's that going. And so there was a period of time where there was Erico did night watch on the hill, and there was a hired watchman, and then there was Erico the volunteer. And they would split the night duty. And the hired fellow got sick and couldn't come, so Padri told me to go and do night watch with Erico. And we'd split the night. And I'll bring this story up again in the afternoon because it influences what happened, something that happened with poetry. So on one of those, I started writing poetry or writing different things. And one of the things I wrote was something called The Seven Facets of Living a Life. And it was sort of odd to me that I wrote this thing. And I went into town and I read it to Eruch at the trust office. And he said, it's very like something Baba would dictate. He said, write an introduction to it. So I did it. And this is that introduction and the piece. The following seven facets of living a life are conditions of normal gross consciousness. They are stated to show that love for God in itself is all that is needed to discover God, to come to God, and to be united with God. Meher Baba emphasized over and over the importance of love as a path to God. Baba stated that nothing else but love mattered to him. Furthermore, that there wasn't time for anything else but love. This current age is the Kali Yuga, the age of evil. Baba manifested as Meher Baba, the compassionate Father, the most perfect divine beloved for all to love. Because of his infinite perfection, which embodies the truth which is love, all who love him in whatever way they can touch that perfection, which is their own true self. Whoever strives to take one step in love towards Meher Baba will discover that Meher Baba in turn takes 10 steps towards him. One must realize that it is Meher Baba and the aspirant together as we who take the one step towards becoming one. For it is he who is with each and all himself, looking out from each one's eyes for the truth which is himself. For one who has Meher Baba as his beloved and lover in one, the planes of consciousness, the path, and even the desire for God realization recede into insignificance in the glory of his most perfect Sahavas, where all is drowned in the wonder of his love. the use of the word Sahavas there is because do you know the meaning of the word Sahavas? Do you know anyone? Means literally in India, when Baba used that word, people were shocked because it implies the intimacy of the bedroom. It implies that level of intimacy, that most intimate, most private kind of relationship. Anyway, and this is the Sahavas. So these are the 7 facets of living a life. Striving to live, simply doing what is to be done, no overt questioning. Living out karmic demands unconsciously, facing life squarely. 2, striving to give life meaning. Pursuing work to give life meaning. Working to be rich, successful, famous, admired. Pursuing philosophy to give life meaning. Studying a way of thinking about life or trying to live philosophy to give meaning to life. 3, striving to love God to give life meaning. Thinking that loving God will make God give life meaning. Thinking that life can have meaning if you love God. 4, striving to love God as the meaning of life. Discovering that the meaning of life is to love God. Discovering that life has no meaning except to love God. Finding that God is beyond all life and meaning. Despairing of life, but discerning God to be beyond the reach of living. Despairing of desire for meaning, which is seen to be nothing, but still desiring meaning. 6, finding God as the be-all, in all, beyond all, as all. Obedience to God becoming spontaneous as life loses importance in the light of all-pervading God. Rendering service to all as part of the one eternal God, and rendering service to the one in all. 7, losing personal self, God alone is real. Loving God is the only existence. Surrendering to the divine beloved as the real self. Experiencing that nothing but God exists as the all-pervading existence. Jai Baba. What time is it? Are we there?
It's 10:12. More minutes.
What?
10 more minutes.
10 more minutes. Okay.
Do you want?
Yeah, does anyone have any questions? She beat you. She beat you.
Dance for Mehera?
Yes, several times.
Really?
The question was, did I ever dance for Mehera? I studied ballet. So I once danced for her on the veranda. They pulled everything off the veranda for some dancers had come from Margaret Craft School in New York, and they had performed, and then they finished. Then she said, "Alan, now you dance." And it was like, I hadn't, I hadn't danced in years, and suddenly I was supposed to dance, and I danced, and she said, "Oh, it was very good because you danced only for Baba," which I was delighted to hear. And also, Casey and I did a little pas de deux, like a regular kind of formal ballet pas de deux at her parents' birthday one year to the Blue Danube. Because Casey had also been a dancer. So we did that once it was humiliating for me. I mean, I hadn't danced in years and years and years and years. So it was somewhere in the mid 70s, 80s, mid 80s, somewhere in there. Okay. What was it? Hey, Jay Baba.
Duty. So the duty in India happens on particular days of the.
It's in the 12th of every month.
So today is the 7th, so 6th. So does it have to be on a particular day that it happens, or any time there is a duty anywhere, does it have the same significance?
I think your relationship with him makes it have significance. That if you approach it as his duty, it has significance. He initially the Duni was kept burning all the time, but Baba came back to Meherabad one time and the Mandali had let it go out, and so he said, he kind of chastised them and then said, "Well, just light it on the 12th, and that'll be enough." But Eruch explained to me that traditionally, the Duni is a companion of the God Realized soul, a fire. They always have a fire. And that said there, and then he's talked about how fire consumes, it's for sacrifice, how it consumes, and it gives warmth. But the Duni is, every perfect soul will have a Duni somewhere that is their Duni. Does that help any? Sure.
So the Duni, traditionally, what I've done, take a stick and you put it into the Duni fire and give something up. This is what I've heard. You give something. What? Can you explain that?
Baba told Don Stevens when he was visiting there and the Duni was being lit at that time to try and embody something he didn't like about himself and put it in. But he didn't tell that, and that's not what it says in the poem. To me, the Duni is something you can implore of. When I offer the stick is when I put I love the Duni, and the Duni is a big deal to me. I like fire. I'm a cook. So, wait 1 minute. So, what Baba says, being a wali, that means it's not perfection. So it isn't infinite knowledge, infinite power, and infinite bliss like Baba, where there's no point in asking anything of Baba because it's already his, and he already is there. But if I were to implore of something for something, it would be the Duni. And when I bow down, I'll tell you, it's no reason for it to be a secret. I say, help me stay here and serve out my life at Meherabad. Help me be here and serve him in whatever way I can. Because I can, it's not perfect. It's Baba I think of it as Baba in the fifth plane. And so in that world that is not perfect, you can ask for something. Is that it? More questions? Yes.
You did not meet Meher Baba in the physical?
No, but on 2 occasions, he heard my name. One was the first trip to Myrtle Beach in 1967 and 68 in August, when I was at the center. A cable came from India from Baba, and he said that he sent his love to all of us, and he had known us all before. And the cable, Elizabeth had it posted in the original kitchen. So that was there. And then there was, when I went to Darshan, all of us who went to Darshan in 69, Baba heard our names, so they read them out when we had made our reservation.
So the question is, did you have any fear of missing out by not meeting him in the flesh? Or like so many of the people that you lived with had? Or did you feel, as the stories you told about how he showed himself to you?
The visions I had in dreams, for me, are real. They're real visions. They're him. And what was I going to say also? There's something else about that.
Alan,
What?
do you remember when you met me in '69 and we talked about Baba and you told me you were going to last darshan and I said to you, but Baba has dropped the body. Don't you want a living master? You said he's as accessible as ever. He is in my heart now. And so it doesn't matter that he's dropped the body. That's what you told me then.
Well, I believe it. I believe it. Believe it now. I think, what do I? Say your question again. Oh, missing out. I have one little, a little story. Is there time for a little story? Every year at Christmas, there would be, everyone would go out to Meherabad for Christmas in the afternoon. And usually I would throw together a little quick skit using the 12 Days of Christmas song, which was really fun because there was hardly any rehearsal and it was everyone was ridiculous. But I would do that and it was really fun. So this year, this particular year I'm going to talk about was the year that Padri had died that year. And I came out from finishing cooking at the MPC. I was going to my room to get a bath and change clothes and go to Meherabad on the motorcycle. And I suddenly realized that there was no one in Meherabad. Padri had always been there. So you never thought about it. But all my fellow residents had left and gone to Meherabad. All the pilgrims had gone to Meherabad. All the servants had gone home for lunch, and there was no one at Meherabad. And I thought, this isn't right. I'll have to stay. And I was pissed off. I have to stay. No one ever thinks of me. They only think of themselves. Having my little tantrum like a baby, and so I took a couple of the cooks and I put one on the veranda of the old bungalow, and I put one. I stationed them around Lower Meherabad because Mansari was on the hill. Yeah, she was still there. Mansari was on the hill, but there was no one at Lower Meherabad. And I went up to have darshan because I feel it behooves me if I live there to bow down at his samadhi every day. He left that for me. He left that for all of us. So anyway, I get myself together. I go up the hill. And when I bow down, I'm like whining, they all left. And here I am. I can't go out to Meherabad. And it's so much fun. And I enjoy doing it. And I feel Baba say within me, I promise you, you will never miss anything that I want for you. And I have lived in that state ever since.
Can you repeat that? You will never miss out.
I promise you, you will never miss out on anything I want for you.
Wow.
So, yes.
Question, where we can find the poem that you read about doing?
Well, if we were in India, I would say you can get it in the office of it's not published anywhere. This translation done by Padri only exists at Meherabad. It's not copywritten. But you could, if you want to have a Xerox of this, you could have it. Sure, take a picture of it. Sure.
Another question regarding the Duni. I would assume, but maybe, do you see a connection between, Baba and his family, when they were growing up in the Zoroastrian tradition, and choir has it's purity, and so does that interconnect?
Not really. What Eruch explained when he said, like Sai Baba had a Duni. All these perfect ones had Dunis. Upasani had a Duni.
Right.
That it's something that someone who is perfect has. It's their companion. Eruch told me that Baba had told him once that there was one Advent where all he did was sit in the forest and feed a fire for his entire life of the avatar in that certain Advent. And so the Duni was his companion. It must be time. Jai Baba. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai.